I've been watching some of the battered lefties put out their videos on voting no for the Democratic national platform. And, they're happy about it. They're strong about it. They're saying, yeah, we did this. That's right. We did this. We were in unison on this particular point. This doesn't include Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them made videos. Some of them made tweets. And I have to be honest. I don't understand. As a flat fact, the Democratic National Committee's platform is meaningless. It's a symbolic gesture. Nobody takes the platform and says, okay, I'm going to govern by this document. Nobody does that. And even despite not having people govern or work in that context, they still wouldn't put in stuff like Medicare for all. There's 88% Democratic support, or elimination of all student debt and free college university. They still wouldn't put that stuff in. So in an imaginary document that is entirely and utterly symbolic, all of you invested a huge amount of energy to put out there that we said no on a meaningless thing. Bah humbug. Yeah. I don't see the value in this. I just don't. I understand you want to make a point. I understand you want to be a dissent. Fair enough. But is voting on an imaginary document the best way for you and the people around you and like you who have all these policy ideas that want to get accomplished? Is that the best way to get it done? Are those imaginary task force the best way to get it done? My point is, it is not. If you're activating and operating from the standpoint that I want to get policy accomplished, and I want to get that policy accomplished because there's so many people that are hungry. There's so many people that are living on the streets. There's so many people that are going to be evicted, or for that matter, don't have the money to just pay for the basic things in life. I, Bernie Sanders, am the avatar of all of that righteous indignation and rage. That's your platform. That's you. You said you wanted a political revolution. And a lot of people in this country, millions, stood up and said, yes, we do too. This isn't working for us. Now, you get into the contest. Your legitimacy is that crowd. Your legitimacy is not Washington, D.C. Your legitimacy is not in those task force. Your legitimacy is the crowd. There are certain things that are real. There are certain things that are not. Task force is not real. I don't mean not real in the sense that people coming together and working on that stuff and not coming to a real solution. Yeah, they're not going to come to any kind of real solution because it's not real. It's just made to look theater, to make it look like something is being melded. You won nothing in this process. On the other point, though, it's not real in the sense that it is just a conceptual organization of people that go together and talk. There's no reality to it. In the context of people being injured and people feeling pain and people feeling deprived of having life and limb, of alienated or violent neighborhoods or whatnot, well, those people are real. Those people are living in hellish conditions. And as a person that is operating from the state of I'm trying to be the avatar of those people, there's a certain oomph and energy associated with that that makes or should make that more of a focal point in regards to the way you wield power. Whether you win or lose in this process, it doesn't necessarily mean you lost at all. And there's a policy or politics of docility, or if that's the way to call it, that basically makes our situation that much worse. Whether that's Sanders in this video that I'm about to show you, or whether that's the way this, voting against a symbolic document nonsense. What do you have at your disposal to try to change what you want to change? And depending on what you have at your disposal, what are you willing to do to get it? What do you want? Do you want to just get elected, or do you want policy? And if indeed the goal and the point is to get policy, then this symbolic gesture does not matter one iota. And lefties, all of these progressive groups and all of these people who consider themselves lefties, at the end of that process, should have stood in solidarity under one banner of, this is what we want if you want to get our votes. And what happened was the opposite of that. Because it was the opposite of that, you basically get nothing out of the process, and you have Bernie Sanders, who's willing to come here and say this.
Is that I think what almost all progressives understand, that in this moment, we have got to do everything we can to come together to defeat Donald Trump, who in my view is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country, and elect Joe Biden. But as I have said many, many times, the day after Biden is elected, we're going to be working with the grassroots in this country, with working people, with people of color, with young people, to stand up and fight for an agenda that works for working families, not just the 1%. And that most certainly includes Medicare.
Here's the thing. Bernie Sanders is talking about fighting on day 2 after you get Joe Biden elected. What leverage do you have at that point? Zero. This is my point. This is not politics. This is something else. This is either sheepdogging. This is gaslighting. I don't know what you call it, but this is not politics. This level of weakness, by the way, also hurts Joe Biden. Now, as this race pursues and goes forward, it's going to get closer and closer, I would imagine. It will get narrower, especially if Donald Trump takes certain executive actions that the public enjoys and likes. Joe Biden and the Democrats have a responsibility, if they indeed care about the nation, to come and get the vote of X number of lefties, meaning the people who are pushing for Medicare for all, the people who want an expansion of Social Security, the people who want a wealth tax or whatever, or the Green New Deal, whatever that is. Those people have an organized frame of thought and frame of mind. And that organized frame of thought and frame of mind should have been immediately when Sanders ended, the argument and the conversation should have been, look, I have a lot of people who have doubts about Joe Biden, but we and they are going to need Medicare for all and this, and be like, the public overwhelmingly supports these policies. This is the people's agenda. That's what that is. Now, is Joe Biden going to come and get my vote and enact a people's agenda, something that the majority of the population agrees with? Look at the moment that you're in. Look at everything that has taken place. It feels like we're at the cusp of some kind of change, and that the people who are at the helm of that are abysmally sad. It's not an FDR type, or not a Kennedy type. It's Trump and Biden. Whereas Sanders, the guy who actually did represent these things, who was virtuous in this process to some degree, was right in his criticism of our system, and even, I would say, many of the prescriptions that he wanted to push through. And yet, weak. I don't know if he got tired. I don't know if this was something that they had planned in advance in regards to this notion of sheepdogging, where they said, okay, well, we're in a race and here are the people. I don't know what took place behind the scenes. What I'm looking at now, though, is Joe Biden, who doesn't believe he needs lefties all that much and is not willing to give anything, with the expectation that Sanders is going to go out and corral his people into the party who doesn't offer anything. And at the best that the people can get at the DNC was to burn or to say no to the platform, which is utterly and entirely sad. And that was not the best strategy going forward after that. Even if you lost, what is your objective? And if your objective is policy and you lost, then you still need to fight under that notion of policy, where you make the argument and make the case, even if you don't want to take it on yourself saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, but all of these other groups have a great reason to not vote for Joe Biden. And those people want Medicare for all, and give your reasonings why for that stuff. They're going to bitch, they're going to moan, they're going to complain, they're going to say you're going to hurt Joe Biden or whatever else. None of it's true. What I mean by that is you standing up for millions of human beings and forcing Joe Biden to come to some level of account in regards to dealing with some kind of, okay, this is what we'll accept. You would bleed off many of the people who say they would never vote for Joe Biden. That's the first point. And the second point, you ensure that Joe Biden gets enough of a coalition to actually win. My point is that by just saying this, you have a lot of people like me who say, go fuck yourself. And because you have a lot of people like me for that, because I look at this and say, they want everything, they lost every policy argument, no, they should earn your vote. And they should earn your vote based upon all of these people who are out there who are hurting and aching and want something fundamentally different in the political system. It weakens Biden. If you had a situation where many of the people that Sanders was backing, Sanders was pushing only for policy, by the way, here are the policies that we want. And Biden says, damn it, fine. I want to be president. I'll take X, I'll take Y. You're not going to get everything you want because you didn't necessarily win. But at the very least, you create a process, an honest process, where you've leveraged your strength, meaning all of those millions of people, all of those lefty groups, all of that stuff, in order to affect actual policy. Now, you could say Democrats don't care about losing. And if you dive into Sanders' head, Sanders, 3 a.m. between him and his God, might perfectly admit that they would be willing to destroy it all if I was going to win that. And because they were willing to destroy it all if I was going to win it, it is better to just give it to him. That's another line of thought. Meaning Sanders is so terrified of Donald Trump that his assumption is that the Democratic Party would tank it all, give the election over to Trump in the same way that it happened in England or in London, and basically go with this notion under Trump and blame Sanders for it. who he does not want to necessarily be perceived as Ralph Nader, but beyond that point of him not wanting to be perceived as Ralph Nader, would try to tank it. And if in his head he thinks, God, man, they got me over a barrel, they've won and outmaneuvered me in this, I am tired, so okay, I'm now just going to give it to Biden because either way, it's going to be Biden or Trump because they're not going to allow me to win this thing. That could also be a line of thought. The thing is, if you're going to think that way, then maybe it is necessary for that system to fundamentally change. Maybe your call for a political revolution was the right thing. And maybe that political revolution had to do that at times may not necessarily be bloodless. What is more important to you? The pain and angst and the hunger of all of these people who are out there about to lose their houses, or for that matter, is in debt, or your buddies, or for that matter, not pushing back on this stuff. I guess it annoys me because I look at this and think, look, if you actually had pushed Biden, you probably could have got a larger coalition of people to go along with Biden, especially if you could show actual and real concessions. If the Biden administration came along with this notion of, okay, we'll accept Medicare for all, then regardless of what I think about whether or not I would vote for Biden, I do know it would bleed off a lot of people. The Democratic Party doesn't even want to do that. And everything up to this point has been just tokenism and theater, as opposed to actual, real bargaining and concessions. The task force was stupid because that's not where your energy lies. Your energy lies in the crowd. And so the argument is basically accept XY policy. It's not even a party issue. And you would get these people's votes. And you need to justify not supporting those policies, especially if it means Trump is going to win the election because you're not going to support those policies. That's your argument. You have a policy that has 88% Democratic support. If you are a lefty and you have policy with 88% support, you nearly unanimous support across the policy, and they still tell you to go kick rocks, then there's something wrong with the institution, because it is not in any way representing your interests. It is representing someone else's interests. And yes, that's more so financial. I'm saying you have almost a righteous justice of fighting this stuff and pushing for this stuff in order to get this stuff across the finish line. That's the only way you can play this. I mean, there is no other move in regards to having or trying to get some level of policy accomplished. Is it true that Democrats might tank it all? Yes, it is. Should that overly concern you? No. In order to get out of this Chinese finger trap, if you have nowhere else to go, you have to be willing to focus on this issue of policy and at times let them lose. What is your objective? And is your objective furthered by basically voting for and putting somebody else in power that takes you further and further to the right because you're so terrified of the boogeyman that's already on the right? This doesn't help him. Challenging him would have helped him. Pushing him, trying to force him to accept and acquiesce on one of these major policies would have been the thing that helped him. You didn't want to do that. For whatever reason, you didn't want to do that. This basically now is telling people, yes, I battled Joe Biden, but now I just want you to vote for him because these guys are awesome and Trump sucks. Not a ringing endorsement, but all of them know that the reason why Joe Biden is getting props on this is entirely because of people who just don't want Trump in office. There's nothing there in the sense that they love, per se, is more so that his name is not Donald Trump. Biden can't make an affirmative case for even why he is running. And having Kamala Harris with him forces her to be considered basically a presidential candidate also because Joe Biden is not altogether there. It's just heartbreaking to end up in the situation where Sanders and all of these lefties are swinging at shadows and calling those swings wins. Whereas the right politics, not this docile politics, the actual and the correct politics of this would have been to have all of those groups that were unified under the banner during that particular election to come out and say, this is what we want. No, I can't do that singularly. Could the Sanders campaign have done it? Yes. Should they have done it? Yes. They got nearly, $250 million from Republican on that. Says, yes, that should have been done. But again, that's if your optimum objective is policy and trying to find ways to make the argument to get that policy across the finish line and force it if they want to win. If the Democratic Party is not willing to accept a policy that has 88% Democratic support and will argue that no, we're not going to accept that particular policy, and this is blackmail, and this is hostage taking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, but it has 88% support. It's nearly unanimous that the public wants it. How do you justify not accepting that? And if they want to die on that hill, let them die on that hill. Look, my issue here is that I know of no other way to move the ball forward regarding getting anything accomplished regarding policy. And when I see an election where it looks like Joe Biden may be potentially blowing Trump out, Joe Biden does not give two shits about what lefties want. They just don't. Why should he? You have nowhere else to go. You vote for them reflexively. Even the battered wives of the campaign that were out there, that were delegates that were voting against the platform, basically kicking at shadows, even them, they're probably going to end up voting for Joe Biden. Not for anything he's doing, not for anything that he is. In fact, it has to be against their better prerogative. And yet, they will go out and make that vote. Joe Biden can take a dump in Sam Cedars' cereal bowl. Sam Cedar will eat it, and he will continue to vote for Joe Biden. I'm just making the point that at a certain point, you have your attachment to the political system just goes away. Just because the number of people who are willing to do something out of this kind of fear of sorts. That means that basically what you want doesn't matter. Your policy priorities don't matter. Everything else is subordinate to just getting him out of office. In which case, Joe Biden doesn't have to be anything. He can stay in his basement for all he cares. Ultimately, the election is around and a referendum on Trump himself. This could have been different. I guess that's my point. This was an inflection point. You've had all of these millions of people that are going to get thrown out of their house. 170,000 people that are dead. I mean, not even talking about, for the most part, the money that people are going to lose right now. Where they're going from week to week, basically, without sustenance in order to get by from point A to point B. Now they're talking about sending kids to school, and they're even ill-prepared for that. And the people who are fated to deal with that challenge is Joe Biden or Donald Trump. There was another guy in the race, right? And under this context, this is not justification for aggressive action in regards to trying to intervene in what is currently taking place. Personally, I think it is. And that's kind of what I mean when I say this kind of argument against the party structure itself and using the crowd itself to harness against the political apparatus. The politics of docility is something that you were taught, and that is something that basically keeps you into this weird frame of mind that the political structure that is not entirely real, it's just conceptual, that's all there is, and that's all of politics is. And it constrains it into those things. Breaking it down into a task force leaves everybody out the conversation except for the few people who are in the room. The mob, the crowd, was not leveraged in the way that it needed to be leveraged for you to get the policies that you needed. And in this very specific case, weakness hurt Sanders. Weakness not just hurt Sanders, but it hurt the left. It left us, to some degree, disorganized, as opposed to having the campaign being a focal point as going forward, trying to get those policies accomplished. It is a noble pursuit. And honestly, I think it's immensely worthwhile to know whether or not the Democratic Party will be willing to lose the election as opposed to accept policy that has 88% Democratic support. I think that, why wouldn't you want to know that? That should tell you something very deep and very troubling about your party, that it's not very democratic at all. And all of these edifices and systems that have come into place in order to try to con people, released worse, blue no matter who, all of that nonsense. All of that stuff keeps you in the political system to which you currently exist. Maybe Sanders didn't think anything else could take place. Maybe he didn't think that he could even win. And like I said, he might have even had the thought that if I took more aggressive action on this, that basically, if they do lose, I'm going to get blamed for it. I don't know how he's processing this in his head. But when I look at this, my first thought is what you might have lost in points, you still have in people regarding capital. And even if you get 50% of the people who back you that says, okay, fair enough, let's take this ride, and refuse to accept a candidate in the same way you guys refuse to accept this imaginary platform, you'd have had far more ability to get something accomplished from the standpoint of Medicare for all, even in losing the Democratic Party race. But that's not where we are. And the people who were involved in this, that wasn't their concern. Weaver started working at some kind of group in order to try to con lefties into getting back and voting for Joe Biden. And none of this has a certain tenacity that's associated with how bad things are right now and the stress that many of the people are under. So, it's aggravating to me when I see that. And when I hear Sanders talk like that, I think, God, man, this weakness is not something that is prized in politics. It is not rewarded in politics by any measure. And again, I have to ask, why are you running? And are you running in the sense that you want to get these things accomplished because they dig in you so much and it hurts when you think about those things? Or just a momentum off of 2020? Or, 2016. And maybe you got tired. I don't know. I guess all I'm saying is this weakness did not help lefties. These groups that say we demand X or we demand Y. And then the moment Joe Biden says kick rocks, they say, okay, we'll still vote for you. It's not a demand if you don't necessarily have a consequence to what you're talking about. All of these lefty groups should have all coalesced under the same umbrella, since they have basically the same belief system, and said, this is what we want for our vote. What do you think a union negotiation is? If a company, and you had people who worked for that company, those people were forming or were in a union, the company does something over the course of time that pisses off the workers, and the workers get to the point where they say, fuck it, we're not going to work until this changes. And they walk. They do that because that is their only capability in putting some kind of hurt and leverage on the company to which they are working at that is doing something that they don't necessarily like. It is common practice. It is a protest march. It is people being willing to say, I am done. There has to be accountability in this company. And no, we don't necessarily own the company, but at the very least, we allow you to make your profits, and we're not going to be here allowing you to make your profits. So every day you're going to lose cash, and we are too. But we're doing this because the higher ideal of going forward matters that much more than putting up with just a burdensome rule set. Your politics is no different. The only difference, I suppose, would be the coalition and the people who recognize themselves that are in the context of a coalition. The union is already organized. The left is not. And after Sanders' loss, it got that much more fractured. Bernie, you had such potential and opportunity, and that has just gone up in smoke. Let's see. It is painful to do these shows without the Sanders stuff. It bothers me so much. I look at this and I think to myself, well, yeah, there are opportunities here to push your agenda forward. Meaning, if you're sitting somewhere and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to lose this race. All right. But even if I lose this race, is there something I can get out of it? Meaning, if I'm playing chess with somebody and I think, damn it, this guy has a dominant position, but is there something I can extract for whatever the person is doing, even if it's not necessarily enough to win in an outright way in regards to one of the struggles that are taking place? The answer to this is yes, especially in the context of politics. And in that context, you have a laundry list of things that you want, and you have a laundry list of polls that show that the public prefers those things. Your argument and framing is the thing that matters in making those conversations or arguments, even if you want to do it in somewhat of an ambiguous way. I understand why those groups aren't voting for Joe Biden. I mean, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have all of these people who are ill and sick. They're going to be all of these medical bills. There needs to be Medicare for all. And so I understand those people taking a moral stand saying this is what they need. I will vote for Joe Biden, but I understand those other people doing so. My point is that you get rid of the one thing that you have at your disposal to get some of what you want in the political process. And for whatever reason, time after time after time, again, you don't do it. And in not doing it, you do weaken Biden. Giving your undying support and allegiance, especially if a lot of people just roll their eyes at that. It's not going to get the people that roll their eyes. Those people want actual things. But you could bleed off those groups by basically getting him to acquiesce on those items. Now, you can say Biden would never acquiesce on those items, fair enough. But it should be made clear, and the argument should be very clear of what you are arguing about and why. Meaning, these are the policies that I'm arguing about. And all of these other lefty groups, I mean, there are 10 million, 20 million people out there. Joe Biden's going to lose this race if he doesn't necessarily acquiesce to the people's demands. If Joe Biden wants to argue that, no, I'm not going to represent the people's demand, then let him do that. if they're going to hassle you and come after you, and they will, talking about, hey, why aren't you going to give your support to Biden? When are you going to give your support to Biden? And you would just continuously make the point. The issue is not me. It is the responsibility of the candidate to get the vote. And you have a policy here with 88% Democratic support. And Biden is basically saying, I am willing to lose the race as opposed to accept a policy with 88% support. That's the fight. The fight is not in task forces. And even in the context of getting in or getting out of the election, that is the fight that needs to be had. It needs to be public. It needs to be very clear. And people need to be able to see it. Democrats already hate you. So it's not necessarily a situation of, oh man, they're going to hate my guts. But again, your objective is larger than you. And that's for all of us. Lefties, we have this kind of cosmic responsibility of being the conscience of this world of sorts. But in being the conscience of this world, you have to be very clear that not everybody has that particular tenor. And every good thing that you do is not necessarily going to be rewarded. I say that only to say that in this kind of political combat, you can't take this weird, holier-than-thou tenor and believe you're going to be successful in a contest where no one else has that as a handicap. Govern nobly, yes. But working in the shadows is an aspect of the political space, and it has to be done. And Sanders, again, who, for whatever reason, running on a rainbow, didn't believe that was necessary. Bernie promised to be revolutionary, man. I know he did. Oh, Bernie promised to be revolutionary. Malcolm X, Milk, what's Kwame? Oh, I'm sorry. Malcolm X and MLK, Kwame specifically said to not support evil to earn my vote. Bernie was never a revolutionary. No, I'm sorry, he wasn't. Idea man, yes. Great ideas, great energy and fire in order to bring attention to that particular subject or issue. But I don't know if it's a failure of imagination. I don't know if it's a failure of, okay, how does this, or how will this work? Meaning implementing a particular idea or plan. And so if I want a political revolution, great. And part of this is all of these policies that the public wants. Okay, then great. Then the question only becomes, based on what I have at my disposal, how do I get what I want? How do I trade one for the other in this transactional process? The people who are holding on to that are basically the Democratic Party. And if I need to get them to appropriate something that they in no way want to appropriate, how do I do it? And what do I have at my disposal? You just lost the election. What do you have at your disposal? What you have at your disposal is basically saying, look, I have a philosophical, ethical, moral responsibility to fight for all of these people that are out there that are in desperate straits. You get our support when you appropriate our policies. Let them bellyache. Let them bitch and moan. Put one mic in your face after the next and have a conversation with one after the next. Get your story straight and nail the point of framing over and over and over and over and over again. That's a political fight. That's like a union fight. You have your group, they have their group. There are things that you want, there are things that they don't want to give you, and you negotiate and fight for those things. That's politics. What's been taking place is not politics. And it's almost a gaslighting docility. Bernie gave up completely, not voting for either. Yeah, neither am I, Michael Goodman. Agree. Agree. Seth Peterson, thank you, Seth. Pop reality. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, these are difficult to watch videos, man. Let's see. Essays. What is that? Hamid Threat. I told you, Jamal, that what you didn't care. Bernie is doing what they do. Get out and vote for the DC. Oh, I see. Jamal, you're embarrassing yourself. Oh, wow. I'm embarrassing myself. Saying this is true in his beliefs. Oh, I'm not saying he's not true in his beliefs. I'm saying the problem is that, look, if you believe that the world is going to hit the bricks because of some kind of climate emergency, you believe it. Flesh to bone, believe it. And you say to yourself, how can I vote for any of these people if they are against what I want from the standpoint of climate? Now, you may have a Democrat that will come out and say, I believe in science. And you say, great, these people believe in science. But then they will open up these drilling platforms or being gods of oil and all of this other stuff. And you think to yourself, well, wait a minute. The world is about to hit the skids. These people said that they also believe this. My point is, a belief in something has a certain logical action to the belief. It's not entirely just this kind of thing that floating in the ether. At some point, as a human being, that belief will trigger a particular action. If you are bothered by people living on the street, and you know the number of those people, if you're bothered by the people who are going to be crippled from the standpoint of the COVID-19 virus and the number of people who died in that virus and the medical bills that are going to come from that particular virus, if you're concerned about those things, even the funeral bills and the funeral homes of people that were just snatched away, and those things plague you because you realize that's a lot of pain that is going to be visited on your society that has one of the worst healthcare systems in the world. If you are concerned that the elderly are able to get older and to die with dignity, and in their life with a certain degree of dignity, meaning not struggling, not broke, not necessarily having the things that they need, not having people who can be with them from the standpoint of nurses, I'm saying to ensure that our society, after a particular person put their muscles and energies and mental energies into a full life, that we regard them as such and keep up our end of the contract, and we make sure that they're okay. If you believe those things because you find that currently they're disasters and that those disasters have a human cost and a consequence associated with it, how do you not take provocative action to deal with that? How do you not? Like, if I'm seeing this guy is about to get shot and I recognize the guy's about to get shot and I just stand there, watch the guy get shot, am I somehow culpable for not getting involved in that particular process of not even pushing the guy? Now, you could say, no, dude, you could have gotten shot too. But let's say for the moment I'm wearing some kind of armor. If I don't help, am I not culpable in the process? Meaning, if I care anything about life, should I not intervene? Does that life matter at all? Does that life have value? And if that life does have value, shouldn't that compel some kind of action for me in order to respond to the fact that it has value? It's something I believe so deeply that it almost acts as an unconscious action. I'm making the point that all of the pain and anguish that we have in this country, especially right now in the COVID-19 virus, is his moment. This is his moment. I mean, whether Sanders wins or loses the race is almost less relevant to him being able to take a spotlight and argue for these various items that he has all sorts of credibility associated with it, despite the fact that they will be bellyaching about it. They're going to bellyache about it anyway. It doesn't matter. So I'm making the just very basic point that this was an opportunity, and it burns because it feels like an opportunity was missed. And I think that's where some of the bitterness comes in when many people are talking about this, especially from the standpoint of lefties. It feels incomplete. It doesn't feel like there was even a real political contest. Sanders didn't even want to do Oppo research. So, to basically give your support away in the beginning, none of them did that. And to not just give your support away in the beginning, not willing to utilize what you were able to create, this kind of web and network of human beings that function under this notion of this is what we want. And not being able to articulate that is to get a policy that has 88% over the finish line. There are problems with this. And I think that's something that lefties honestly need to engage and ask yourself, why don't you get the things that you want that at this point, in this election, if nothing else, you know the public supports? And is giving everything over for nothing in return the way to do it? It's been 40, 50 years. At which point are you going to get what you want politically? How much longer do you have to wait? How many different arguments do you need to hear year after year after year after year? Meaning every 4 years, the exact same argument replicated for another generation. This doesn't seem familiar to you? Under Hillary, or for that matter, Obama might have been different, but the second time around with Obama and Romney, or for Bill Clinton and whoever, I'm making the point that this strategy has been rolled out year after year after year, every 4 years. And I think lefties feel like they're trapped. I mean, I'm making the point that you're trapped because you're allowing yourself to be trapped. It's not so much that I love Trump. He's grotesque as all hell. I'm making the point that if the Democratic Party is willing to ignore a policy that has nearly unanimous support, then maybe they should lose because they are no more democratic. They're no longer democratic. No one else could articulate that and bring people together under that one message. And there's no way to predict that entirely, right? I mean, that could have went bad. It is an aggressive action in trying to get something accomplished, and the media and everybody else would be very pissed at you. But There was no other maneuver. There was nothing else that you had at your disposal. And so you end up with giving it all away for nothing in return. Some of you may disagree with that. Fair enough. Fair enough. But I don't think what I'm saying is wrong. But look, love Sanders to death. I haven't said a bad word about him in the sense of him as a person. People get tired. People have all sorts of things that work on them as they go about their day. So I can't necessarily punch him too much, but it's more so in this kind of political space where people invested money and time and energy into a particular person. The thing that you want is a tenacity, similar to the tenacity that Republicans go after attacking the poor with defense of the poor, defense of the post office, defense of, telecommunications. And, I'll leave it. I mean, I love Sanders to death. I have no issue with Sanders at all. This is everything to do with the person who's functioning in political space. My analysis or my thinking in regards to how that person is functioning, why that person is acting that way, should that person act that way, and what was even in that person's mind potentially as they were running in the race that would allow them to take one action versus another action. I still do believe that it's possible that one of the considerations that Sanders had to run with is, even if I take the most aggressive action and I hold my faction, they will be willing to lose and allow 4 more years for Trump. And I can't stand going through that. So I have to just give it either way. Meaning in his head, I'm going to lose either way, so I might as well just give it away and function in order to help Biden get elected over Trump. That will be one of the saddest portrayals of that. But it's also true that Sanders might just not want to engage in that type of conduct. And that for him, it's a normality to associate with Joe Biden and news and everybody else. And these larger issues are things that they debate upon almost in an intellectual way. So it doesn't drill into the gut in the way that it should, in order to bring enough fire for him to push that in the way that that needed to be pushed and run that race in the way that race needed to be run. But that's not a dark mark against him. He's a person. He has certain things that he likes or dislikes. It's just in this political space, letdown. That was a letdown. Like, share, and subscribe.